Hello, Cemba class of 2021. I am glad that we were able to kind of adjust on the fly and not have people have to travel in to campus Saturday when the weather was so bad. But here we are in our plan B for how to deliver this material. And as I've mentioned already in an email, the plan for the team reappraisal, which is something I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute about why we do this, but we know that teams perform better if there's sort of regular check-ins and reviews of performance. And we also know that people learn well when there's sort of natural divides or natural breaks. From my own research on team learning and interruptions, finding kind of a temporal crossing point where there's a natural break is a place where people often have an opportunity, and in fact learning works better. So the semester break is a good one because, as we'll talk about in a minute, obviously you've finished certain classes and you're starting new ones. So what we would be doing typically is in person, having me present a little bit of content for you and then having you complete 2 exercises. So I'll talk a little bit more about each of those in just a minute. And at the end, give you some instructions for when and how to complete this process offline when you can find the time with your own team in the next week or two. So I think to start with, I usually say this, why am I here? Well, we weren't here, but we're sitting here in front of the video now. One thing that I hear quite often is my team is fine. The first semester went fantastic. We have compatible working styles and things went well. Why do I have to come here? Why do I have to watch this video and do this process? So I put here just a reminder about Google. And from our organizational behavior class, the very first class we had where we talked about evidence-based management, we read the Google case. And in the oxygen case, one of the things that I noted was in some ways the impressiveness of the decision to go through the oxygen process and devote energy and resources in people analytics to try to understand, how to improve leadership and management in Google. And part of the, I think the message here is that Google was really doing fine. They were growing. They weren't having notable turnover or engagement problems at that time of their history. And yet they were looking for ways to continue and even be better. And so that's my appeal to you, is that even if things went smoothly in the first semester, there's an opportunity to look for improvement, and there are some reasons as well to make sure that we take a little bit of time right now as a pause and reestablish how we're going to work together. And another, I think, way to think a little bit about this and kind of why we're here and what the timing of this is going to look like is that there is, we know that teams, especially ongoing teams, which you are together for the entire first year, go through a series of performance phases. And this, this diagram certainly you could think about happening in a project. So, the first stage here is what, Marks, Matthew, and Zaccaro basically said there's these ongoing processes of performance and performance phases where there's action and then they're interspersed with transition and action again. And in some ways, we're at transition now. The very beginning of this process would be sort of maybe launch rather than the idea of a transition. But basically, if you think about what we started in August, we had team launch, and that was a series of preparation processes before getting in place, right? So establishing some of the basic parameters of how we're going to work together, what are our major goals together, who's here, who knows what, how are we going to plan things, how are we going to do things. So, in the beginning, your team in August was a new team. And then the team participates in a variety of different kinds of action and task management. And again, this whole cycle you could think about this if you had a class that had 2 or 3 or 4 projects, this kind of cycle should be happening. But when the project is done, or in this case, when the semester is done, there's another transition. And this is an opportunity for reflection, to take a look back and say, what happened? How did we do? Did we live up to our goals and principles of how we wanted to work together? Did our outcomes meet our expectations that we set in the beginning? And so this is an opportunity for team learning, for innovation, for improvement, so that when we're ready for the next phase of action, things go even better. And so what I would say, again, to why we're here, is that we are in some ways, in a macro sense, in this box here, where we're getting ready for semester 2 down here. And so this is a really good point to think about preparing and reflecting on what happened and making our team even better for the future. So, another way to look at this is that, last August, your team was a blank slate, right? So you didn't know each other. You didn't know what the experience in Cemba was going to be like. You could sit and plan, and we could have these experiential exercises like Lost at Sea, and talk through, kind of at a cognitive level, talk through what we wanted to have happen. But I noted back in August that you don't know what this is going to be like to put Cemba into your life, and you also don't know what else is coming, because as we know, life happens. People lose jobs, people get promoted, people get transferred, people have family challenges, people have health challenges. All of these things are happening, and you now have a much better idea of how you're going to work together, and what you felt worked well and what you felt could be improved. So if this was the team last August, one of the reasons we're here is, how about now, right? Well, now we know that once people work together, that we fall into some habits, right? So we can get ourselves into a rut. It's pretty quick. Richard Hackman did some research looking at teams and found that even after the first meeting, certain communication patterns that were in place and obvious in that first meeting were seen all the way through, no matter how long the team worked, unless some active attention was made to adjust or improve that. So, a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, are you looking for the same old poop or some crazy new poop happening? Just to be a little lighthearted about this, the reality is what we're trying to achieve here is to avoid repeating things that some or all of us felt were not very productive. And you do have an opportunity now to address that as this next semester gets kicked off. There is some sobering research evidence that many teams just don't plan. And we had this conversation back in August. We had this conversation in the organizational behavior class, that we, in the US especially, are very doing-oriented culture. So we tend to, just jump in and start acting. And we have just so much evidence that even small amounts of planning can improve performance. And that is both at a kind of high level at the beginning of a long performance period like the semester year, but that's also within projects and sort of small planning, week to week, day to day, etc. And then the other thing we know is that even if they do plan, so we kind of induced planning in August for you, they rarely modify or revise. So kind of left to your own devices, you just keep working the way you've been working, obviously, unless there's a major crisis or some kind of major problem. And people tend to just kind of work through and deal with irritants that they would prefer were different, but don't feel they have the time maybe to address, or the tools maybe to address. So we don't want this to happen to your team. So there's two parts of why we're here. One part is because we can always get better, and we can always make the experience better, and we can look for ways to improve. And then secondly, if there are some things that weren't going to plan, if there were some outcomes that weren't exactly what we were hoping, this is a great opportunity to address things and improve your experience going forward. in the second semester. And I can say that, that all teams we have had, people just find this a productive process to do. Even if they feel like there haven't been particular challenges, it kind of reinforces their commitment to one another. If there have been some challenges or interpersonal challenges, this has been a place where people have had a chance to repair relationships, find new ways to support each other, and find a better experience going forward. And so finally, the other reason we're here at this time to do the reappraisal is that, this is the kind of stylized view of a team process of performance. And we talked about this at our orientation. We talked a little bit about this in the organizational behavior class as well, in terms of, what are the elements to high performing teams. And if we look at this, one part of that is input. So in a classic input process output model, the team task and the situational demands. Okay, the other thing that's an input are the people, and that's the same. But there's many new things here in the new semester. You have new classes, you have new projects. There may be, again, new situational demands. There may be some additional personal life changes. There could be additional workplace changes, etc. So new stuff here, okay. And the other thing is, as a result, these middle parts might need modification, partly because maybe you didn't actually administer or run your team in the best way. So there could be some opportunities for improvement and learning. But then again, because these demands are changing here, some new things need to change. And so remember that team processes are communication, our information sharing, our conflict management, conflict resolution, decision making, and emergent states are things like psychological safety and trust. And so you want to make sure that if any of that was perhaps never established as well as it could be, or if there were some experiences that you had in the first semester that shook that a bit or undermined it, this is the chance to make a difference and make this even better in the second semester and reinforce these relationships that you have with your teammates. So this concludes our brief introduction. I'm trying to keep this even a little bit more limited than we would have in class, just so that you don't have to sit in front of the monitor too much. But this is why we're here. This is why we've devised this session at the beginning of the second semester, because we know from research that this is a good time to address anything that had been challenging, to work to reinforce and improve what we're looking at going forward, and hopefully launch the team for this second action phase that's going to happen through the end of your first year.